Kohala, YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, YAHAWASHI, Barakatah, YAHAWAH, Ruach HaKodesh. This is your brother, Obadiayahing, and to all my Achim and Akhwav, I say Shalom. Want to get my tea, so Shalaki for a minute here, just to get it straight. Okay, Ruach HaKodesh was hitting me up today about something. I got a chance to watch it, and it was very interesting because in the time that I have not seen things as I'm seeing them now, and I'm sure most of us feel the same way. We're seeing things that we have not seen. We're experiencing things we have not experienced before, and this is across all platforms and all nations. But specifically, of course, I'm always talking about Hebrew Israelites and their awakening. Now, the awakening, actually, we have to look at when did it actually start? When did the awakening actually physically and mentally and spiritually manifest itself to the world? Now, I looked at a recent posting by Sakari by Chief Priest Alzar and also Deacon Hakah, and they did a background check on when One West started, the original IUSPK, and Elder Bivens. We try not to call someone Abba Father, but they did call him Abba Bivens, Leroy Bivens, and where he came from, where he was born. They said he was born from slaves, was his original heritage down in Georgia, and then on up into Philadelphia, where I actually grew up in Philadelphia and was born in Philadelphia myself. And I was introduced to Hebrew Israelites in 1969 by a good brother who was going around wearing one of the Stars of David, so to speak. In terms of that, you would know it as that. This brother has been in the truth for a long time, way back before he introduced it to us when we were living in the projects down in Philadelphia. And he's still going strong, and I believe he is up in major rank when it comes to his position as a servant of the Most High. I don't want to go into mentioning his specific name. I don't think it's appropriate for me to do that. His government name, last name was Webb. I'll just give you that much. That's all you're going to get. And he was good. He was a good brother. He always was very conscious about his people, even though we lived in the heart of some very trying and difficult times when we were all trying to find out who we are and what our purpose was. And on that note, I got the Most High. He does whatever he wants to do. Barakatah YAHAWAH, Barakatah YAHAWASHI, Kohala YAHAWAH, Kohala YAHAWASHI. You know, you got to give praise to the Most High. All praises to the Most High through YAHAWAH, through YAHAWASHI, and the Ruach HaKodesh has been pushing on me to touch this. And the topic is not in line exactly where my next lesson was supposed to be in terms of the book of Micah, but this has to be spoken of because the way it was put on my spirit, and you just got to go with what the Ruach HaKodesh tells you. You can't and brings to you. You cannot, if you're really following the Most High YAHAWAH, you can't throttle it or just decide you're not going to do it. You just got to go there, and you just got to deal with it. and just bring it. You got to bring it out. But the topic is Obadiayahing the hijacked dream of an unrevealed Hebrew Israelite messenger. I'll say it again. Obadiayahing the hijacked dream of an unrevealed Hebrew Israelite messenger. And what that that particular title attaches to, from my perspective, in terms of what was given, is the last interview that Dr. Martin Luther King gave 11 months before his actual assassination. And the things that he was saying, I don't even know if anyone's ever heard it. They certainly do not bring it out. Now, I'm not for any particular holidays that, or these holidays that this country puts upon us, because, and the reason why I'm saying that is because the subversion and the distractions and the subliminal seduction in a very crafty way that Esau-Edom puts upon our people and has been doing, and has basically put consignment in and drawn in agreements with all of the nations of the world to do the things they've done to us as a people, and under the guise that, of course, they know exactly who we are. It's not a mystery at all that they don't know who we are. And Dr. Martin Luther King is going to expound on a lot of this. I'm going to share this clip. It's about 20 minutes, 26 minutes. I think it's very worthwhile paying attention to. I'm not going to pull a lot of scripture with this at this particular time, because I don't have to, based on the fact that this information is going to be very powerful and you're going to listen to it. It's never more powerful than scripture. But I just needed to get this in because the Most High wanted it to get in and get it said, because I don't think that most people get a chance to see this, and I think people should pay attention to what it is. But my particular narrative on this right now, and just a little bit of the little bit of what I call the my commentary, is important in terms of bringing forth what we're dealing with right now in this period in time. And I think it's very important to understand that the whole concept of and the procedure that the Most High in the Ruach HaKodesh is taking me through right now is showing the mapping that the Most High has done with his prophets, that they're showing these specific derivatives of end time events that are happening right now. And of course, Dr. Martin Luther King was very much speaking at that time in the past, but he was very much alluding to and speaking to what's going on in the future that is not being addressed, but is deliberately being set in motion the way that it is and being hidden. And right now you can see in the world that the lineage of the culture of the people who are in control and being given control, and of course I'll have to give you this scripture, which is Job chapter 9:24. The earth is given into the hands of the wicked right now. This is their time period where they have this opportunity to rule. We do not have this time period at this point. But what Yahawah is doing, what the Father is doing, is he's sinking this ship fast. And even though they are doing everything possible to bail out the water from this sinking ship, this Titanic is going down. And it's going down quite fast, and it's going down from all areas. So while you're trying to bail out the different plagues that are sinking this ship, and I'm talking about this entire planet and everything that's being done, it's not just this country, but this whole world is being completely visited by the Most High. And he's visiting it in a way that they cannot handle it. And Micah's going to go into this. And I'm going to go ahead and bring some of it because I have to, but just some of the language that I think is specific to this as well. And of course, this is the next minor prophet or prophet that I'm going to bring in terms of the book of Micah. I'm in Micah chapter 1. All right. So, I'm going to go ahead and start at the top, but you're going to hear what I'm saying here. The word of Yahawah that came to Micah the Morashite in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Now, pay close attention to Samaria and Jerusalem, because that has a great deal of effect. The Sumerian woman at that point, that needed something from YAHAWASHI, and the apostles told her, it is not meet to give the bread of truth to a dog, and we that's roughly paraphrased, but that was important to know that this Sumerian situation appeals to in context this particular country, as well as those that have signed up with Psalms 83 to do the things they've done to Jerusalem and Hebrew Israelites. Okay, so again, Saul concerning Samaria and Jerusalem, hear all ye people, hearken, O earth. See, he's saying the whole earth, and all that therein is, and let the Lord YAHAWAH, power God, be witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord cometh forth out of his place, and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. He's doing this right now. He is bringing his recompense, and now when he says tread upon the high places of the earth, he's concerning locations that are high, where they are inhabited by people who believe that they are superior in terms of their position, and they don't need YAHAWAH, they don't need our Father, and they don't need his guidance nor his praise or his blessings. But they've been they have been fooling the world in believing that they have some communication and connection with the Most High, but they clearly do not. Now, of course, Micah is specifically dealing with and speaking to the northern kingdom, and I'll go more into the detailed aspects of that when we go deeper into this particular lesson on this prophet. But I had to get this part in, because this was also what I was studying and touched my understanding when I was looking at what needed to be presented in terms of what Dr. Martin Luther King did, because he was speaking about his people, which is our people, the Hebrew Israelites, who are unrevealed. They are hidden, but he is covertly doing the communication, and some are picking up on it, but those who are in power and are subjugating us, they know exactly what he's saying and who he's saying it to. So they know who he's talking about and what he's saying. So that's very important to understand. And I just wanted to give that a little bit there. Okay, finishing this part of what's mentioned. Verse 4: and the mountains shall be molten under him, and the valleys shall be cleft as wax before fire, and as the waters that are poured down to a steep place. Okay, and then this part for the transgressions of Jacob is all this, and for the sins of the house of Israel. See, what is the transgression of Jacob? It is not Samaria. Question. And what are the high places of Judah? Are they not Jerusalem? Okay, therefore I will make Samaria as a heap of field, and at plantings of the vineyard, and I will pour down the stones thereof into the valley, and I will discover the foundations thereof. And all the graven images thereof shall be beaten in pieces, and all the hires thereof shall be burned with the fire, and all the idols thereof will I lay desolate, for she gathereth it, and for the hire of an harlot, and they shall return to the hire of a harlot. See, we keep rolling right back into this same type of situation. We left dealing with harlotry and idolatry as a nation. We're in the muck and mire of idolatry and harlotry as a nation, as a people right now. You can still see it on our people. It's hanging on them, just like the pants hang off the butt of the Hebrew Israelite men that are walking around in disillusion, as well as the women who are going around with all types of different colors in their hair. They seem to hate who they are, and who they idly worship is not the Most High YAHAWASHI, YAHAWASHI. This is harlotry at the highest degree that we're seeing. Therefore I will wail and howl, and I will go stripped and naked, and I will make a wailing like the dragons, and the mourning as of owls. For her wound is incurable. See, now if a wound is incurable, that also leads into what some of these plagues that we got going on, including this corona situation, because a wound is incurable in terms of this point of it. But not incurable to the point of those who are following the law, statutes, and commandments of YAHAWASHI, YAHAWASHI, and getting out of this the systems that have been set up from the religious practitioners, that is completely an abomination to the Most High. and it's easily to distinguish between the two. Incurable, for it is come unto Judah. He is come unto the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. Declare ye it not at Gath. Weep ye not at all in the house of Arath. Roll thyself in the dust. Now, I'm going to just give you Gath for a minute, and maybe Arath, but then I got to go into finishing the commentary, and I want you to get this interview in by Dr. Martin Luther King that is talking about how the dream was hijacked by Esau-Edom, and that the unrevealed Hebrew Israelite messenger in Dr. Martin Luther King was bringing a message that our nation just didn't completely understand. And when we did understand it, we looked at it through the glasses or the visual perspective of the oppressors who had us in derision, in subjugation. And as we look through their perspective of it, it's untrue, it's twisted, it's not realized, and it's actually giving them the ability to try to direct us where they want to direct us to, push us and move us around like the chattel that we were when we were subject to being brought here, a lot of us by the North Atlantic slave trade, North American Atlantic slave trade, as well as the slave trade that went from this area to Spain on the Northern Kingdom. This is really something that was a twisted situation that was bad. But the area of Gath, I'm in my Bible dictionary, and I'm going to Gath, and it says here, okay, 1 Samuel chapter 6:17, and the native place of the giant Goliath, 1 Samuel 17:423. It's probably stood upon conspicuous hill, now called Telashavash, upon the side of a plain of Philistia, where the Philistines are in Africa, at the foot of the mountains of Judah, 10 miles east of Ashdod, and about the same distance southeast of Ekron. Okay, and that's where Gath is, one of the 5 royal cities of the Philistines. Joshua chapter 13, verse 3. So I wanted to give you that one. And of course, the other one that it spoke of was before we go deep into that, is the house of Arath. Roll thyself in the dust. Okay, so if we go to what the house of Arath, or what Arath means, we'll go there and we'll look that one up as well. Okay, Shalaki. Let me get it in my dictionary. Okay, Arath. Okay, Arath, the house of Arath, a place mentioned in Micah. It just says, chapter 1, verse 10. Its site is uncertain, so they really don't know. So here we are in an uncertain place for where we should are not supposed to be, but we were here because of our transgression against the Most High. And it says, okay, in verse that was verse 10, chapter 1 of Micah, and it says, Arath, at the house of Arath, roll thyself in the dust. So you're rolling yourself in an uncertain place in the dust. Isn't that something? That's crazy. That's absolutely insane to think about that. So here we are in this situation where the Most High is turning the sands of time and switching the plagues onto those that have not paid for anything. They are grappling and scrappling and just gasping for air to have power to try to sustain their kingdom that is going down in flames very fast. This is what the Most High decided he wanted to do and was going to do. And because he has decided to do it, they are in awe of the entire situation. Now, why do I say in awe of the entire situation? Well, because the people who are in control of the earth at this particular time because they're given that position, they don't want to lose their kingdom and the power of their kingdom. They don't. That's something they certainly do not want to see happen. But they don't also take responsibility or refuse to adhere to or even understand or want to listen to what they have done to get to this position of authority that they have on this planet. It is so easy to identify when the issues of the past have been brought up about what they have done, which they now wish to assume a position of everybody should be working together in love and harmony and unity. But that's not what this world was that they've built has been constructed upon. It's actually has the roots and the foundation of absolute evil. And you cannot build a house of love on top of a foundation of evil. And this is what is going to be talked about by Dr. Martin Luther King in his interview. But it's very true to see what's happening now. And who would think in your wildest imagination that the Most High, who is a righteous God, who now are in control of this world, say he is holy and righteous and good, would not get some kind of repayment or judgment for those who have done things. The things that we have done, we had to completely pay in every stretch of the imagination. So what makes anybody think that the people who have done the things to acquire this land and this earth and this control do not have to pay for it? That's completely unrealistic. And now that it's happening, they are baffled, bewildered, and shocked, and just don't know what to think about why the things are happening as fast and as thoroughly as they are. But this is what the Most High said he's going to do, and he is doing it. And now I want you to look at, Shalaki, I want you to check this out, and I think it's very good. And let's see if we can enjoy it for what it is. So just bear with me a second while I set it up for you. All right, Shalaki. It's going to take me a minute to do this. You know how technology is. You know what I'm saying? You got to go with you got to use what you can to get yourself set up in a technological capacity. If you want to run something, I'm still doing some things to, okay. All right, here we go. We got it now. All right, here we go. All right, let me just go ahead and get this around here. Spin it around. Make sure we got it set up here so we can get it all locked in good for you. Let's see where we at here. We got it yet? Let's see. I think that's it, isn't it? Let's make sure we got it. We're getting it. Bear with me, folks. I'm not the most technical genius in the world, but I'm getting good. I'm getting better at it. It's taking me some time, like anybody else. You know, you gotta work with what you got to get the best you can. You know, that's right. I'm gonna get this camera set up good on it. I think I got it. I believe I do. All right, let's see. All right, here we go.
Three, Civil Rights, King, Van Oker, roll 20, sound 36.
Dr. King, this church is as good a place as any to go back over your commitment to the civil rights movement. When you went out from here into university, and then you went to Montgomery, Alabama, and started the bus boycotts there. What was the philosophy of the civil rights movement as you saw it then, more than 10 years ago?
Well, I would say then the philosophy was that we must go all out to use legal and nonviolent methods to gain full citizenship rights for the Negro people of our country. Of course, that particular struggle and that philosophy centered on breaking down all of the barriers of legal segregation. So I would say that in that period, the basic thrust for the gaining of citizenship rights for Negroes was to end the humiliation surrounding the whole system of legal segregation.
Dr. King, was there something peculiar to the place where you started and the kind of people you attracted? I mean by that, there was a strong attachment on the part of your parishioners in Montgomery to the church. They were older people, weren't they?
Yes, I would say by and large they were older people who participated in the boycott because they were the ones using the bus more than anybody else. And Montgomery was a community predominantly church-centered, so that it was very easy to get to the vast majority of Negroes because they were in some way connected with a church in the community.
Was there, in addition to your commitment to the idea of nonviolence, wasn't it also the only thing you could do, the white community having the monopoly on violence, that if you had tried violence, they would have met it with violence? It was the only device open to you, wasn't it?
Well, I'll put it another way, that morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society. And it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. Now, there is no doubt about the fact that in our struggle in Montgomery and all over the United States for that matter, nonviolence is also practically sound. It would just be impractical for the Negro to turn to violence. He has neither the instruments nor the techniques of violence. We are about 10 or 11% of the total population of the nation, and I would say we're about 1/10 of the firepower. So it would just be totally impractical and unwise and unrealistic for the Negro to think of violence. Well, I saw this in the beginning in Montgomery, but this wasn't the basic reason that I turned to nonviolence and that I believed in it as a philosophy. I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
Is there something about nonviolence that made it, and I use that in the past tense, that made it more useful among Southern Negroes than the ghetto Negroes of the North?
I wouldn't say there's anything that makes it more useful to Southern Negroes. I think it is true that we've had more nonviolent movements in the South because the problem for many years was more crystallized and, in a sense, more visible in the South. We didn't have many civil rights activities on a massive scale in the North until 3 or 4 years ago. So I would say that we just haven't had a chance to experiment on a broad scale with nonviolence in the Northern Ghetto. I have the feeling that nonviolence is as applicable and workable in the Northern Ghetto as it is in the South. Now, there's a larger job there. The frustrations at points are much deeper. The bitterness is deeper. And I think that's because in the South we can see pockets of progress here and there. We've really made some strides that are very visible, and every Southern Negro knows that he can do things today that he couldn't do 4 or 5 years ago. Wherein in the North, the Negro sees only retrogress. And he doesn't find it as easy to get his vision centered on his target, the target of opposition, as he does in the South. Consequently, this is made for despair and at many points cynicism, a feeling that you can't win. And it simply means that we've got to develop in the North a massive job of organization and mobilizing forces and resources to deal with the problem in the urban ghettos of the North, just as we've done it in the South.
Well, in the South, particularly in Alabama, you had visible villains: Jim Clark, Bull Connor, cattle prods, police dogs. But in the North, you don't have those visible villains. Isn't it hard to get your people aroused and directed at something that isn't visible?
Well, that's exactly right, and this is what I was saying when I said it's harder to see a target. In the South, in the nonviolent movement, we were aided always, on the whole, by the brutality of our opponent. It isn't the same way in the North. The other thing is that you don't have legal segregation in the North as you do in the South. So it is much more difficult to get people to see exactly what you're doing, but it isn't an impossible job. It's a hard, it's a tedious job at times to get people to be aroused from their apathetic slumbers, but I still feel that Negroes in the North can be motivated just as they were motivated in the South. And I think as time goes on with the growing economic deprivation in the Negro community, it will even be easier, because people will come to see that not only is something wrong in general, but something is wrong in particular in their own economic and housing situations.
Well, what is it? I mean, how do you find it? It's very subtle in the North, is it not?
Yeah, you don't know what it is.
It's subtle, but it's becoming much more visible. Anybody can see that the schools are more segregated in the North today than they were in 1954 when the Supreme Court rendered its decision declaring segregation unconstitutional. Anybody can look around the ghetto and see that ghetto schools are predominantly segregated and devoid of quality. Anyone who moves through a major ghetto of our country will see the housing conditions. People don't have to be reminded that they are forced to live in slums in many instances, and they're often rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. And it isn't too hard to see the exploitation that the Negro confronts in the ghetto, where he is forced to pay more for less and constantly trying to make ends meet, but because of either no job as a result of unemployment or a job that is so economically unprofitable that the person can't make ends meet. And I think they see all of these things, and more they're coming to see them, because before the people of the North were looking to the South and they supported the struggles of the South. Now they're coming to see that their problems are very real and they've got organized to grapple with them.
Was there something hypocritical about the fact that the South existed and the North could point the finger? And then when the Civil Rights Acts were passed in the early 60s, you couldn't point the finger anymore?
Well, there was no doubt about the hypocrisy of large segments of the nation on the whole question of racial equality. I think the best example is that many of the senators from the North and the West, and congressmen generally, who voted for civil rights legislation in 64 and even 65 with the Voting Rights Bill, refused last year to vote for civil rights legislation because it dealt with an issue applicable to the North, the whole housing question. And this, it seems to me, was the greatest expression of the hypocrisy of many of our citizens and many of the senators and congressmen of the North.
But isn't that part of the dilemma now? That people knew that Negroes were being denied what was guaranteed to them by the Constitution, by the fact that they were citizens of this country. Then when they were given those rights, do you feel the white community said, well, we've given them all that we have, now it's up to them?
Well, I think the dilemma is much deeper, and I think one during this period of transition has to be very honest with America. And honesty impels me to admit that America has broad racist elements still alive. Racism is still existing in American society in many areas of the society, North and South. And the other thing is that there has never been a single, solid, determined commitment of large segments of white America on the whole question of racial equality. I think we have to see that vacillation has always existed, ambivalence has always existed, and this to me is the so-called white backlash. It's merely a new name for an old phenomenon. I see the white backlash as a continuation of the same ambivalence and vacillation of white America on the whole question of racial justice that has existed since the founding of our nation. I think the other thing that we must see at this time is that many of the people who supported us in Selma, in Birmingham, were really outraged about the extremist behavior toward Negroes. But they were not at that moment, and they are not now, committed to genuine equality for Negroes. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for Negroes and all poor people. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality and quality education a reality in our schools. It's much easier to integrate even a public park than it is to get rid of slums. And I think we are in a new era, a new phase of the struggle, where we have moved from a struggle for decency, which characterized our struggle for 10 or 12 years, to a struggle for genuine equality. And this is where we are getting the resistance, because there was never any intention to go this far. People were reacting to Bull Connor and to Jim Clark rather than acting in good faith for the realization of genuine equality.
Do you think white people in this country, and I'm talking about non-segregationists, people devoid or thinking they're devoid of racism, do you have any idea of what they want the Negro to be in America?
Well, it depends on the level that we are talking here, because I think you have to make a distinction between the people who are genuinely and absolutely committed in the white community on the question of racial equality. And I must confess that I think they're in a very small minority.
No doubt.
I think the vast majority of white Americans will go but so far. It's a kind of installment plan for equality. And they're always looking for an excuse to go but so far.
Why are they looking for the excuse? What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
And you know who we are.
That's a part of it. And
Hebrew Israelites.
That grows out of something else. You can't thingify anything without depersonalizing that something. If you use something as a means to an end, at that moment you make it a thing and you depersonalize it. The fact is that the Negro was a slave in this country for 244 years. That was a willful thing that was done. The Negro was brought here in chains, treated in very inhuman fashion. And this led to the thingification of the Negro. So he was not looked upon as a person. He was not looked upon as a human being with the same status and worth as other human beings. And the other thing is that human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually rationalizing that wrong. So slavery was justified morally, biologically, theoretically, scientifically, everything else. And it seems to me that white America must see
right now
that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma, and that can never be overlooked. So I think these things are absolutely necessary. The other thing is that America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land.
They brought the 13th
Amendment
to put them right back in slavery.
As a matter of fact,
in jail.
To get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation.
We have no boots, we have no straps. How are we going to lift up something?
And seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps. But it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression, and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Apart from wanting to live better, which all of us want to do, to raise one's children in a better way, to be better, does the Negro in America know what he wants to be?
I'm convinced that almost every Negro in this country, other than those who have been so scarred by the system that they've become pathological in the process, and we all have to battle with pathology. Nobody really knows what it means to be a Negro unless one can really experience it. And I know we all have to battle with this constant drain of a feeling of nobodiness. But in spite of this, I think the vast majority of Negroes in this country know that they want to be people, they want to be men, they want equality, period. It just boils down to that. And we haven't been able to be people. We haven't been men because of all of the conditions that we've lived with and the syndrome of deprivation surrounding conditions, whether it's in housing, in the economic area, or in schools, or in the vicious credit practices that we face in the ghetto, and all of the problems of closed doors and constant defeats. But in spite of all this, I think we all know, basically, that we want to be men. We want to be persons judged not on the basis of the color of our skin, but on the basis of the content of our character.
But you know that many young Negroes don't want anything that smacks of the American white middle class. But do they want something that smacks of whatever is the black middle class, or do they just not want bourgeois values, which after all are the basis of this democracy?
Well, I think we have to see what they are saying. I would be the American taint, so to speak, our background. I think there are certain unique things within any culture and certain cultural patterns that when you get to the process of amalgamation can really lift the whole culture. And it seems to me that integration at its best is the opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity. I think the other thing that we've got to see is that these young people are saying that there must be a revolution of values in our country. As Jimmy Baldwin said on one occasion, what advantage is there in being integrated into a burning house? And I feel that there is a need
we should not be integrated into this house. That's what the Most High does not want us to do.
Because some of the values that presently exist are certainly out of line with the values and the idealistic structure that brought our nation into being. Unfortunately, we haven't been true to these ideals, and many of the values so-called white middle-class society of values that need to be reviewed and re-evaluated, and in a real sense they need to be changed. So I think the young people in the Negro community who are raising these questions are raising some very profound questions about our total society. In other words, they are saying that there must be a restructuring of the architecture of our society where values are concerned. And with this I would agree with. So in the quest for integration, I think we can offer our whole nation something, because there are three evils in our nation. It's not only racism, but economic exploitation of poverty would be one, and then militarism. And I think in a sense, and in a very real sense, these three are tied inextricably together, and we aren't going to get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
When you stood on the Lincoln Memorial that day in August '63, and you said, "I had a dream," did that dream envision that you could see a war in Asia preventing the federal government doing for the Negroes, preventing the society doing for the Negroes, that which you think had to be done?
No, I didn't envision that then. I must confess that that period was a great period of hope for me. And I'm sure for many others all across the nation, many of the Negroes who had about lost hope, saw a solid decade of progress in the South. And in 1954, which was, 64, 1963, 9 years after the Supreme Court's decision to be in the March on Washington, meant a great deal. It was a high moment, a great watershed moment. But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments, and I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation.
Dr. King, even if there had not been a war in Asia, would you still not have had this nightmare insofar as the Negro movement for equality then touched on two things that the white community holds sacred: their children and their property?
Oh, I have no doubt that we would have encountered great difficulties, great problems of resistance if the war had not been in existence. So that I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended, but I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that
Esau's sword.
We do face many more difficulties as a result of the war. It's much more difficult to really arouse a conscience during a time of war. I noticed the other day, some weeks ago, a Negro was shot down in Chicago, and it was a clear case of police brutality. That was on page 30 of the paper, but on page 1 at the top was 780 Viet Cong killed. That is
They're doing the
something
same
about a war like
narrative,
this that makes people
Con,
insensitive,
and the same
dulls the conscience.
type of derision right
It strengthens
now
the forces of reaction
by the
and
same
it brings
people in
into
media.
being bitterness and hatred and violence, and it strengthened the military-industrial complex of our country, and it's made our job much more difficult, because I think we can go along with some programs, if we didn't have this war on our hands, that would cause people to adjust to new developments, just as they did in the South. They said they'd never ride the bus with us, blood would flow in the streets, they wouldn't go to school, and all of these things. But when people came to see that they had to do it because the law insisted, they finally adjusted. And I think white people all over this country will adjust once the nation makes it clear that in schools and housing, we've got to learn to live together as brothers. I think the biggest problem now is that we got our gains over the last 12 years at bargain rate, so to speak. Didn't cost the nation anything. In fact, it helped the economic side of the nation to integrate lunch counters and public accommodations. It didn't cost the nation anything to get the right to vote established. And now we are confronting issues that cannot be solved without costing the nation billions of dollars. Now, I think this is where we're getting our greatest resistance.
And now the payment by
we can't get rid of
YAHAWAH, who they ignorantly call God,
without it costing the nation
is being
something.
called up. Shalaki.
NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out
Shalaki. Now, as you can see here,
down here,
as you can see, Shalaki. All right. Quiet.
Digital exclusives.
You need to be quiet. Okay. All right, shalom. As we can see here, that I'm sorry about that. Need some light on the subject. Okay. As we can see, that was a very good interview by Dr. Martin Luther King in terms of showing how he, as an unrevealed Hebrew Israelite, was speaking on behalf of our people and showing that there are issues that were back then are still now today the same and have been escalating. And now, as I was saying in the background, the Most High YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, is the cost that this country and the world has to pay is now being, the margin is being called. If you know what a margin call is in the stock market, that means all your debts and everything you owe has to be paid. And the Most High is going after payment right now. The thingification, I love when he said thingified and thingification. We have thingificationalism. We need to coin that word and get it out, because that's what we have going on right now. The thingifications have a couple of tentacles that bleed into all the areas of our existence here in this subjugation, in this country. Thingification has homogenation, where we have Hebrew Israelites who don't know who they are. They think they're African Americans, they think they're black people, and they're looking to try to assimilate and become part of a country and a nation that does not want you. They may superficially use you, which they continually do on a regular basis all the time. But in terms of embracing the actual love that they talk about they have and that they should have through who they claim Jesus is giving them, or they're supposed to support that in terms of being accepted by their Jesus, obviously they're good time, fake white Jesus looking individual, which doesn't exist. This is a fake love. It's a love of usury and the love of themselves to say we need to use these people the same way we used them when we took them from where they were from in Africa and brought them here, as well as the ones that were here of the Northern Kingdom that we moved out of the country and shipped them everywhere. Of course, Shalaki, the Most High was the orchestrator of our recompense and our judgment for us disobeying his law, statutes, and commandments. But they took it too far, and that's why payment is being called on the floor now by the Most High. He is calling up for payment, and he's not accepting their terms. He's not listening to their terms, and he's exacting judgment in the way that he is. And all of us who want to conform or want to thingify ourselves to being part of their system and thinking their system is going to rejuvenate and come back after this big takedown by the Most High is put in place, you're wrong. It's not coming back up. This particular kingdom is finished. The Most High has had enough of the abominations. He has had enough of the defilements. He has had enough of the iniquities and the transgressions and the lasciviousness and the lawlessness that is going on in this world. He is not playing. He is done with all of it. And we need to stop using thingification type bywords and identifiers and trying to help bail out a ship that's going down. Martin Luther King said, the restoration or the ability to allow us to be saved and put into a burning home or a burning house, it was unrealized, and it shouldn't have happened. And that's where we are now. And we need to back out and go back to the Most High. And the Most High is going to take us all to the point where it's going to come down to, you're either going to call upon him truthfully and go to him, or if you do not, you're going to have to go down with the Titanic. It's just as simple as that. It's what the scripture says, what the word says, and there's no other way that this is going to be rectified except by who they ignorantly call God, YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, and that's what he's doing. And so I hope that you enjoyed this Shalaki on some of the technical issues. I'm still working those things out in terms of being able to use certain videos at certain times. I don't normally use videos as much in terms of other people's videos, but I'm doing what I can with the information that I have. So hopefully you did get the gist of what this is about. And now the next session and lesson, we will pick up from Micah, and we will continue that lesson and bring that one forward to continue how the Most High is mapping through the lives of the prophets, his prophets, the directives that are showing end time issues right now. So I hope this was edifying to you. I know it didn't have a lot of precepts in it and a lot of scriptures, but it did bring forth the message that I thought we needed to know about how Obadiahing the hijacked dream of an unrevealed Hebrew Israelite messenger in Dr. King. Shalaki and Shalom.